the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccer Files Canada. Welcome to our continuation of Series 19. This one looking at the players of the 2023 Asian Cup, due to be played in January 2024. This episode is looking at the players of Kyrgyzstan. Here we go. Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccer Files Canada. I'm Kevin and this is Series 19 of the players of the 2023 Asian Cup, played in 2024. This episode covers Kyrgyzstan's players. And we're doing this mediacast in two parts. Part one here is a look at the candidates for the squad and their likelihood of making it. We think we went into too much detail in previous player mediacasts we've done, so we're aiming for a lighter, more narrative version this time. Part two will come out when the squad lists are released and the final squad selected. We think that'll be in late December or early January. And at that time, we'll go back over the list that we compile here and see who made it and who didn't. And we'll also cover a couple of other things like injuries and surprise selections. We'll talk more about that at the end. We have made a separate video on what we'll be covering over the next 9 months. YouTube watchers can see the link to that on the screen, and it can also be found in the show notes for both watchers and listeners. In short, we are focused on the Asian and African Cups, both of those taking place in early 2024. And we have also started coverage of World Cup 2026 qualifying. So this episode has 3 sections. Section 1, we will give and discuss some general information on the team. Section 2 is the main part where we look at the candidates in each position and their likelihood of making the final squad. And in Section 3, a short section, we'll give any closing thoughts and we will preview Part 2 in more detail there. Okay, let us begin then. And we start with some general information on the squad. So observations, we really only have one here, and we are talking about kind of an influx of new players recently. That is happening with all teams to a degree, but in the case of Kyrgyzstan, it's exacerbated by a couple of identifiable reasons, I should say, including recent injuries to players, but we'll get into that in the main text, as it were. We do have a few other observations, but I think it'll be better to discuss these along the way and then summarize them in the conclusion. So let's move on to our second thing, retirements. So our condition here has been veterans with over 60 caps who have been off the team since the 2019 Asian Cup. But in the case of Kyrgyzstan, only 2 players have reached 60 caps and both of them are still active. So we will mention, though, a couple of bigger names from the 2019 Asian Cup. And both of these actually have German-sounding names and German connections, although both of them were born in Kyrgyzstan. So part of the Asian Cup in 2019 was Edgar Bernhardt. Edgar Bernhardt was with the team from 2014 to 21, 41 caps there, but he's 37 years old now, and he spent a lot of his playing career in Germany. He moved to Germany at a young age. So he was a starter in the 2019 Asian Cup, but last played for the squad in June of 2021. So not really a consideration for the squad here. And the other is a fairly similar story. Vitaly Lux, who was with the team from 2015 to 19. He's 34 years old now. He only had 32 caps and 8 goals, but he did score quite a bit for the national team at important times. He scored 3 goals in the Asian Cup there. and two of their goals in qualifying too. So he also is with German teams. He's only been with German teams, and Vitaly Lux last appeared for the team about a year after the Asian Cup, November 2019. The cup itself had been played in January. So Edgar Bernhard, Vitaly Lux retired from the team, but still a couple of relative veterans playing with the team. Let's look at Kyrgyzstan's club affiliations, or the clubs the players play for. And I would say about 75% of them are with domestic clubs, maybe 80%. And the clubs that these that are contributing to the national team here, we try to keep it to 3, and it really is 3 in the case of Kyrgyzstan. Alga Bishkek. Bishkek is the capital of Kyrgyzstan, and Alga Bishkek, a big team there. Also Dordoy Bishkek. So 2 of the teams in the capital there. And then the other one, Abishis Atakant, probably the 3 most represented teams on the national team. Outside of the country, we do see players playing within the region there. Sorry, just let me sort out the graphics here. Within the region, and we see players playing in Uzbekistan, Russia, Kazakhstan, and Belarus. And we do have a few players playing in the wider world there. So in Turkey, Germany, and then some kind of intriguing locations, Indonesia, Hong Kong, and Lithuania, players with clubs in those teams. But I have to say, these, even the ones in Germany, are mostly obscure clubs, some names that I have not seen before. In terms of big names, clubs, really only one, and that's a player with Galatasaray, and I think he's young and not really integrated into the team yet, but that is a pretty big club name. Otherwise, none of the teams in Russia or Germany are really noteworthy. Okay, let's look at the recent games. We're not really interested in the results here. We'll actually be more interested in the formations. But the reason we're doing this is because we do examine the players' participation over the last 2 years to determine their likelihood of making the squad. So we will take a look at the games over the past 2 years here. So, we begin with friendlies. In March 2022. These are the first games in 2022. So 2 friendlies there against Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. And in June of that year, 2022, they had actually qualifying for this Asian Cup. So this was the second group stage. And they played 3 games in a group with Singapore, Myanmar, and Tajikistan. And obviously they advanced from that group stage to reach the cup. That's why we're talking about them here. After that, we have friendlies in September of 2022, and we see most international teams having friendlies in the 3 months of the fall here. However, Tajikistan only had 1 in September. That was against Russia. And then in October and November, they didn't have any friendlies, and didn't play all the way from September until March 2023, where they had 2 friendlies against Myanmar and India. In June of 2023, though, they had a tournament. It was actually the first the first local tournament for the Central Asian nations, CAFA. And they had 3 games there in June of 2023. Those were against Afghanistan, Iran, and Oman. Actually, Afghanistan and Afghanistan and Iran are in that region, in that locality. Oman was an invited guest, and it's kind of interesting because they meet Oman down the road. They meet them a few times. They are scheduled to meet in the Asian Cup group stage here. Okay, and then we finished with some friendlies. Once again, they had one game in September 23 here. That was against Kuwait. And this time they did have games in October, 2 games against Bahrain and the Philippines. Okay, so once again, we're not too interested in the results. We're interested more in the formations. And we got to summarize here because they really had a variety of formations. So we're trying to boil it down to a pattern here. They did use a 4-2-3-1 just straight out quite a bit. It becomes a bit more complicated with other formations, but basically they're all variations of a 4-5-1. So usually that means the midfield is divided, and it could be divided several ways. That 5 players could be a 1-2-2, or it could be a 2-1-2, like that, variations on the 4-5-1. But the pattern there is still consistent in that they do have 4 at the back and 1 up front. And over the course of the games, we do see a couple of times where they had 3 or 5 up front. And let me see. I don't see any situation. Oh, yes, they did have 2 up front just once, as far as I can tell. When we look at recent formations, then it's the same thing. It seems like their standard formation is the 4-2-3-1. That doesn't mean they necessarily use it the most. It means they always seem to kind of go back to it. So over the past 6 games, or 8 games, will go from March 2023, they've used it 4 times. The other is now a variation of the 4-5-1. So it's the same basically, and we see a 4-1-4-1 or a 4-1-2-2-1 formation there. So again, think of 4 at the back, generally 1 up front, and the midfield could be divided in a variety of ways. Okay, let's finish this section with the upcoming game. So World Cup 2026 qualifying has begun. It begins in November for Kyrgyzstan, but actually began in October for the region. There were preliminary round games in October, and we did 10 podcasts on each of those sets of games. That gave us a chance to look at some of the weaker teams in the region, which are rarely kind of considered. So I was happy to do that. Kyrgyzstan, though, received a bye in that round, and they're not playing the team that graduated from that. They're playing 2 teams that received a bye. The first one on November 15th will be against Malaysia, and the second one, you guessed it, it's against Oman. So they're in the same group for World Cup qualifying and in Asian Cup qualifying, as well as meeting in their local cup. And we are recording this media cast in the first week of November, so those games are about a week down the road. We guess that they'll be using their best players, but it'll be interesting to see what that is given the recent changes that we mentioned at the beginning. And in terms of pre-tournament friendlies, they haven't scheduled any yet, but we do expect that teams will schedule 1 or 2 friendlies prior to the tournament. All right, that is the end of this section 1 on the team. And now we specifically look at the players, beginning with the managers. So we'll begin with outgoing manager Alexander Krestinin. Alexander Krestinin is a Russian-born manager. He played professionally in Russia in the late 90s and 2000s, but he didn't earn any international caps. And in addition to managing Kyrgyzstan from 2014 to 2023, he managed one of the bigger clubs, one of the ones we've met, Dordoy Bishkek, at the same time, or at least from 2017 until 2021. So in the middle of that period there. So he retired from Dordoy Bishtek to focus on the Kyrgyzstan national team in 2021. And in April of 2021, he departed from the team by mutual consent. And the incoming manager, 20 days later, was Stefan Tarkovic, a Slovakian manager who actually had coached or managed the Slovakian team in 2020 to 22 and led them through the Euro Cup. And he had been a caretaker manager of Slovakia and an assistant prior to that, in addition to managing clubs in Slovakia and one in the UAE. So manager of the national team since April of 2023. Now, I have to say I didn't really see any big changes to the squad when he coached them not long after through the 3 games of Asian Cup qualifying. But I'm beginning to notice as I do these media casts that most managers seem to come in and not make any changes. Perhaps they're basically observing for the first little while, and then they start to make changes a bit later. So perhaps that explains some of the changes we've seen in the autumn of 2023, or one of the several reasons why we're seeing recent changes. Okay, let's move on to the goalkeepers, and I'll point out, as I do in all of the media casts, that when you see a name in grey, like Urzan Tokotayev here in grey, that means they have not been involved in a tournament. Urzan Tokotayev is a definite candidate. And so is likely candidate Sultan Chomoev, whose name is also in grey. But we have a possible candidate in Pavel Matyash, and you see his name in black, which means he has participated in a tournament. And for Kyrgyzstan, that tournament can only be the 2019 Asian Cup, because it's the only one they've reached. Okay, so possible candidate Pavel Matyash, and as I'm doing here, I'm going to introduce the names first, and then I will go back and look at the biographies, especially of the main candidates, and finally finish with a narrative summary of the position. So let me just go back and repeat there. Definite candidate Urzan Tokotayev, likely candidate Sultan Chomoev, and Pavel Matyash is the first of our possible candidates. The other is Dastan Alibekov. And we also have Anton Kochenkov as a possible but unlikely. So I'll deal with these players quickly. We have a couple of candidates at the possible but unlikely or seem to be off the squad, but we're not really going to put them on the list anymore unless there's a reason to. There is a reason to put Anton Kochenkov, because he was the goalkeeper during the Kafa Cup there. He only played 1 game. I think Tokotayev played the other 2 games. But he is 36 years old, and he's not attached to a club. He was with Arsenal Tula in Russia, but now he's unattached. So we think it's very unlikely he will be called up for the Cup. So let's look at the main candidates who we think will be. Urzan Tokotayev has been with the team since 2021 and has 16 caps. He's quite young, just 23 years old, and he plays in Turkey for a club, again, a club I'm not really familiar with, Sanliurfaspor in Turkey. And Tokotayev has started 13 of their 14 games over the past 2 years and was on the bench for 1 other. So not much doubt about him making the squad and being the starter as well. Okay, likely candidate Sultan Chomoev is even younger. He is 20 years old. Doesn't have any caps for the national team, though. He got his first appearance on the bench in September 2022 and was on the bench for 8 of the 9 games, and the other one he was with the under-23 team. So even though he hasn't started, he has been called up quite consistently since September of 2022. So we think he's likely to be on the bench at least for the but called up to the team. Oh, I'm losing my strings here. Okay, Pavel Macias, as we said, does have experience. He's been with Kyrgyzstan since 2009 with 46 caps. He's 36 years old. He was the starter in the Asian Cup. However, he did lose his starting position after poor mistakes on both goals in their first game, and he was replaced by a keeper who is no longer on the squad. He didn't lose his starting position, though, overall because of that. But in 2021, basically when Toko Tayev came onto the scene, that's when he lost his starting position. So didn't start any of the games over the past 2 years, but he was on the bench for 3 and not selected for 11 others, including the last 2 matches. So that means he has been called up recently, Macias, so kind of being used, I would guess, as a third string keeper, or may not make it at all. But he was there for the third last game in September 2023, so is a possible candidate. Also possible, Dastan Alibekov. He also has no caps for the team, even though he's 26 years old. And he got his first appearance on the bench very recently in September 2023 and didn't start any of their games, but was on the bench for 1 and then not selected for the last 2 matches. So a bit of an outside chance for Dastan Alibekov, but we'll talk about that as we move on to the narrative summary of this section. So as we saw, Toko Tayev started all 14 games except for 1, and the one he missed was the second match of the Kafa Cup, where Kochenkov replaced him. However, Kochenkov doesn't look like a likely candidate, as he was not selected before or after the Kafa Cup. So it's really unclear actually who the backup is. It seems to be Chomoev, since the 2 possible candidates here, Macias and Alibekov, didn't appear in the last 2 games. So they still seem to be searching for the third string keeper that they will bring to the Cups. Okay, let's move on to central defenders. And I'm just going to cough, if you'll excuse me. I'm back. Okay, so we begin with a listing of the candidates. So we have Tamerlan Kozubayev as a definite candidate, and Valery Kitchen as a likely candidate. Azar Akhmatov, also likely candidate, and one more still, Christian Brosman, the third of our likely candidates. We have one possible candidate in Amantur Shamirzayev, and we have a player who we won't mention because he's off the team since 2021. We'll bring players like that back if they are unexpectedly named to the final squad. Okay, so let's look at the candidates here. Kozubayev, Tamerlan Kozubayev, has been with Kyrgyzstan since 2015 with 47 caps and 2 goals. And interestingly, he plays in Hong Kong for Eastern AA, and has also played in Russia and other countries as well. He was a starter in the 2019 Asian Cup, was Kozubayev, and over the past 2 years started 9 of their 14 games. Subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 2, and just 1 match that he wasn't selected for, and that was the first match of 2022. So a staple in terms of being called up, and started 9 of the 14 games. So we think he's a definite candidate who will probably be a starter as well. Next, we have the first of our likely candidates, Valery Kitchen. Kitchen has been with the team since 2011 with 42 caps and 4 goals. He is 31 years old, and he plays for a small team in Russia that I'm not familiar with. But prior to that, in 2020, he was with Torpedo Moscow in Russia and Dynamo Minsk in Belarus. Both of those are pretty big teams, and he's played for several teams in Russia. A pretty good resume for Valery Kitchen. He was the captain in the 2019 Asian Cup and started all 4 games. And over the past 2 years, he started 7 of their 14 games, but he was not selected for 7 others, including the last 3 matches. So in terms of participation, he looks more like a possible candidate, but in terms of reputation, I actually don't think he's the captain anymore. But still, in terms of reputation, I would be a bit surprised if they didn't bring him. So we consider him a likely candidate here. Okay, so moving on, we have our second likely candidate in Azar Akhmatov. So Akhmatov was on the roster for the 2019 Asian Cup, but actually didn't see any action. And he has 19 caps for the national team since 2018 and 1 goal. And over the past 2 years, Akhmatov started 5 of their 14 games, subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 4. He actually was out with a broken collarbone for 2 of the games, so that means just 1 match that he wasn't selected for. So, yes, not necessarily a starter, but we think a likely candidate to be named to the squad. Finally, we have Christian Brosman. So Brosman is only 20 years old. He's been on the team, though, since he was 18, since 2021, and has 11 caps. He's actually coded as a right back, but he has played as a centre back in 6 of his 7 starts over the period here. So we moved him to centre back. And as I kind of hinted there, 7 games that he started over the past 2 years, subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 2, and with the under-20 team for 1 other. So that's almost the participation level of a definite candidate, perhaps because he's young. That's a terrible reason to move him down a notch, but we did put him as a likely candidate for that or for some other reason. Anyway, Christian Brosman, a likely candidate. And we have 1 possible candidate in Amantur Shamirzayev. So he is 23 years old with no caps for the national team. He got his first appearance on the bench just recently in October 2023, and he didn't start either of the 2 games there, but he was on the bench for 1 and not selected for the last match. And that's all we'll say about him, because that's close to unlikely, but the recent participation makes him a possible candidate. All right, let's summarize the position. So as we saw, it's almost always 4 at the back for Kyrgyzstan, and that means 2 central defender. But in 2 games, we saw that they have used a 3-man back line. Anyway, I think in terms of 2, it's usually Kozubayev and someone else. So most commonly, the someone else is a rotation of the 3 likely players that we mentioned, Kitchen, Akhmatov, and Brosman. But recently, defensive midfielder Dusobekov was used. We'll meet him shortly. So that suggests that the spot beside Kozubayev is somewhat available. I would guess that Kitchen would be the main man, but we've seen that he's in and out of the team. And so a bit uncertain, but Kozubayev probably going to be one of the starters. Okay, let's move over to left back and begin with a listing of the candidates. So we have Bekzan Saganbayev as a likely candidate, and also Sunyonbek Mamiraliev as a likely candidate. And we do have a possible but unlikely candidate. I'll just mention his name, Kairat Izakov. He got 1 appearance as a substitute and was not selected for the last 3 games. So we don't think he has much of a chance. Okay, let's look at the two candidates then, the two main candidates. Beksan Saganbayev has been with Kyrgyzstan since 2018, 30 caps and 4 goals for the 29-year-old. And he was a starter in the 2019 Asian Cup. Over the past 2 years, Saganbayev has started 8 of their 14 games, subbed in for 2. However, he was injured for the last 2, so that's a bit of a concern, and also not selected for 2 matches. So he is out with an ankle injury, and we will have to update that in part 2 of the mediacast. Okay, and the other candidate is new, but inserting himself quite well. Soyuntbek Mamiraliev. He's been with the team then since his first cap in March 2023, and he started 5 of their 8 remaining games and was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 2. So he's been called up for 8 games since his first appearance and started 5 of them. So perhaps making a bid for the top spot there, Mamiraliev. Let's review the position then with a narrative. Saganbayev did have a firm grip on the position until March 2023, when he began sharing it with Mamiraliev. And Saganbayev's recent injury has given Mamiraliev an even stronger chance at being the starter. So again, we'll have to kind of update on the injury there. But even before the injury, Mamiraliev was making inroads. Next, we go to right backs, and we have a definite candidate in. We have a definite candidate in Kayrat Zergelbek Ulu. Kayrat Zergelbek Ulu, and we also have Alexander Mishchenko as a possible candidate. So let's just talk about the positions here. None of them are coded as right backs. In fact, the only player we have coded as a right back is Christian Brosman, and we see that he's been playing as a central defender, so we moved him there. Zergelbek Ulu is coded as a left back, as is Mishchenko here. So these are kind of out of position players. Anyway, Zergelbek Ulu, I believe he's the captain now, and he has been with the team since 2013, and he is one of the 2 players we mentioned as having more than 60 caps. So 62 caps for this 29-year-old Zergelbek Ulu, and he was a starter in the 2019 Asian Cup. He has started all 14 of their games over the past 2 years. Not always as a right back, though. Sometimes he's seen further upfield as a right winger. So I may need to kind of review his designation there, because he's been playing on the right for quite a while. He lined up as a defender, as a left defender in the 2019 Asian Cup too. Oh, as a left defender, yes, he was on the left in the Asian Cup. Anyway, still worthy of a review. Our possible candidate, Alexander Mishchenko, has been with the team since 2019 with 14 caps, and he has started 5 of their 14 games over the past 2 years. Those are basically when Zergelbek Ulu is playing upfield. And Mishchenko subbed in for 3, but was not selected for the last 6 matches. So possible, or even possible, but unlikely, given that he's been off the team for quite a while now, a half a year anyway. So as we said, these are out of position players, but it is Zergelbek Ulu most commonly there. He did move upfield to play as a right attacking midfielder, in which case Mishchenko started, but recently he has come back into the right back position. So Zergelbek Ulu right now really seems the only candidate for this position of right back. All right, we are finished with the defense, so we're going to move on to midfielders, and we'll begin with defensive midfielders. And we have a definite candidate in Odiljon Abdurrahmanov, or sometimes called Odil Abdurrahmanov. And we have a likely not a likely, possible, and in fact three possible candidates in Magomed Uzdinov, LDR Zaribekov, and a player we met as playing central defender recently, Batyar Dusobekov. So let's go back to the beginning and look at the players a bit of their biographies. So Abdurrahmanov has been with Kyrgyzstan since 2016, 31 caps and 6 goals. He was on the roster for the 2019 Asian Cup, but didn't see any field time in that cup. However, in the past 2 years, Abdurrahmanov has started 10 of their 14 games, and he was on the bench for 2. However, he was injured for the last 2 matches, which is a bit of a big deal that we'll talk about a bit later. So really, Abdurrahmanov, a definite candidate, but the injury may play a role here, a muscle injury, by the way. Okay, Uzdinov, Magomed Uzdinov, got his first cap in March of 2023 and started just one of their remaining 8 games. And he was subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 2 and not selected for 3 others. So basically, I think that was one of the recent games where he replaced Abdurrahmanov to get his first start. The other possible candidate is LDR Zaribekov, and he got his first cap even more recently in October of 2023, and he too started one of their remaining 2 games in October, and he was subbed in for the other, so also replacing Abdurrahmanov when he was injured. Okay, and then finally, we have Dusobekov, who is more of a veteran than the other 2, and I probably should have introduced him first among the possible candidates. Dusobekov has been with the team since 2015, and he has 39 caps and 2 goals, and he was part of the squad for the Asian Cup in 2019. He subbed into 2 games there, and over the past 2 years, he started 3 of their 14 games, subbed in for 3 and on the bench for 4, but not selected for 4. So I would say almost a likely candidate with that resume. And as we saw, he did start as a central defender once, and I think only once actually as a defensive midfielder. But I think I will actually move him up on the list because he seems seems to have the most chance among the likely candidates, or among the possible candidates here. So let's go back and summarize this position. So the formation sometimes does have a defensive midfielder. If it's the variation on the 4-5-1, the 4-1-4-1, for example, or the 4-2-2-2-1. If there is a defensive midfielder, it's usually Abdurrahmanov, and we've seen all 3 of the possible players actually replace him in that position once each, and in the last 2 games, that is because of his injury there. So a lot here depends on Abdurrahmanov's injury status going forward. I should say that we usually actually combine defensive and central midfielders, but they are separated a bit more clearly in Kyrgyzstan's squad or in their formations, but they do bleed in a bit when it's not when it's a two-man central midfield, and sometimes they even have a three-man central midfield. But we'll talk about that in this section where we look at central midfielders. So here we have one likely candidate in Urbol Atabayev as a likely candidate, and we have Ermak Kenjebayev. Ermak Kenjebayev as a possible candidate, and we have Arsen Shorshenbekov as a possible candidate too. And we also have a possible but unlikely candidate in Azim Azarov, and he was not selected for the last 5 matches, though, so we won't talk too much about him. Let's go back and look at the main candidates, though. Urbol Atabayev has been with the team since his first cap in June of 2022, and he started 7 of their remaining games. He subbed in for 2 and was with the under-23 team for 1. However, he was injured for the last 2 games, just like Abdurakhmanov. In fact, the same injury, a muscle injury, and he has been out for the last 2 games. So that is causing a bit of chaos in the central midfield, as we'll see when we get to the summary. He plays in Russia, Atabayev, and he was fielded for all 9 games since he was called up, but as we said, injured for the last 2. So we consider Atabayev a likely candidate, again, kind of depending on his injury there. Okay, the next one, Ermak Kenjebayev. Kenjebayev has been with the team since his first cap recently in October 2023, and he didn't start any of those 2 games, but he was subbed in for both of them there. And also brand new is the other possible candidate, Arsen Shorshenbekov. So he is just 19 years old. Kenjebayev, by the way, is 20 years old. So these are 2 very young players being brought in, probably to cover the injured players there. Shorshenbekov also appeared in October 2023 on the bench for the first match and subbed in for the second match there. So he actually plays for Aliana Vladikavkaz in Russia, playing in Russia since 2022. So these are promising players, but perhaps being brought in a little before their time. And let's talk about a summary of the central midfield. So when it's a 2-man central midfield, it's usually Abdurakhmanov and someone else. So that was actually attacking midfielder Musabekov, who we'll meet later, usually Musabekov as first, and then it became Atabayev here. And sometimes we also see attacking midfielder Shukurov kind of coming back into the central midfield. And it is the same cast of these 3 characters. So Atabayev, Musabekov, and Shukurov. When it is a 3-man midfield, so it'll be Abdurakhmanov and 2 of those players. So for Kyrgyzstan, a 3-man midfield will always be a triangle, a 2-1 or a 1-2, but it'll never be a line of 3 players across the middle. Anyway, despite being a central midfield, Atabayev is not actually noticeably more defensive than the 2 attacking midfielders, Musabekov and Shukurov. So basically, those 3 are in a rotation. Now, we have seen that Abdurakhmanov and Atabayev have both been with a recent injury, and it's really seemed to scramble in the last 2 games for the new manager. So we see all sorts of players brought in and getting starts. Dusabekov and 5 basically new names making up the central midfield. And most of them are attacking midfield, and the 2 players below not really getting starts, but being tried out as substitutes. So be interesting to see both in November and going into the Cup what becomes of the central midfield here. But it would really be upsetting for them to lose Abdurakhmanov and even the newer Atabayev for the Cup. Okay, let's move on to left and right midfielders. So we really only have one candidate here because this position isn't really used. This seems to be a new trend for not only Kyrgyzstan, but all teams. The 4-4-2 formation. The formation they use doesn't really call for left or right midfielders. As we said, it's never a line of three, even when they do have three central midfielders. So the 4-1-2-2-1 kind of has something like it, but as we've seen, it'll be attacking midfielders or central midfielders making up the role. So we do have one player coded as a right midfielder, and that's Akladin Israelov. But we're not even going to put his name on the list, even though he was a starter in the 2019 Asian Cup, and that's because he last appeared for the team in March 2022. So Israelov is only 29 years old. Actually, I see a couple of reasons here for putting his name on the list. But it would be a surprise to see Israelov come back into the squad. Okay, let's move on then to left wingers. And when we talk about left wingers, we're really talking about the upper left quadrant of the field. So generally, actually, for Kyrgyzstan, that's a left attacking midfielder, and the same is true on the right. Or it could be a left winger, or it could be even something close to a left forward. But anyway, think of the upper left quadrant of the field here. And we have a definite candidate in Gulzavit Alikulov, and a couple of possible candidates in Beknaz Almazbekov. Did I say likely? I meant possible. And Eldar Moldozunasov. Two possible candidates there. And again, we have a couple of names at the possible but unlikely or soon to be off the squad that we won't mention because they seem too far off the squad. So let's go back and look at these players in more detail. Gulzigit Alikulov is a definite candidate. He has been with the team since 2019 with 25 caps and 4 goals. So that's pretty good for a 23-year-old. He got his first cap when he was 19. And he plays in Belarus for a team I'm not familiar with, actually, Neman Grodno in Belarus. And he started 9 of their 14 games over the past 2 years. He was on the bench for 1. He was on special leave for 1 and not selected for 1. So basically, always called up. And we have seen him play in a more central role, but generally we see him in the upper left quadrant as a left attacking midfielder most of the time. The first of our possible candidate is Beknaz Almazbekov. He's an interesting case. He got his first cap when he was 17. He's only 18 now, and first appeared on the bench in June 2022 and started one of their remaining 12 games. He was subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 2, and not selected for 7 other matches. He is the player who plays for Galatasaray. I should be clear, Galatasaray's youth club in Turkey since 2017. So looks like an up-and-comer, definitely just a possible candidate here. He was fielded, though, in the last 2 games. And so looks like he's kind of well on the way. The other possible candidate is Eldar Moldozunasov, and he has 10 caps for the national team since 2021, and started one of their 14 games over the past 2 years, subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 4, and also not selected for 7 matches, but in his case, he was not there for the last 3 matches. So it looks like Almazbekov has a slightly better chance there. Let's finish this with a summary of the position of left winger. Actually, the position is generally left attacking midfielder, and the few times they have used a three-man central defense, it's actually been the left back and right backs moving up to a left wing position. Anyway, Ali Kulov is usually in the position, but when he's not been there, each of the players below did get one start. And otherwise, it's been an attacking midfielder twice in that position and a forward once. Meanwhile, Ali Kulov has moved over to other positions. He played as a central midfielder. I think he also played as a right winger also. Anyway, they do seem to be looking for a backup player for this position, but the definite candidate, Ali Kulov, seems to have nailed down the starting position. Let's go over to the right wing, where it's much less clear. In terms of candidates, we only have one at the possible level, and that's Ate Zumachev. So Ate Zumachev started 2 of their 14 games over the past 2 years. He was on the bench for 4 and not selected for 8 others, including the last 2 matches. So really not making inroads as a starter, Zumachev. And that's all we have for candidates. So let's talk about the position then. They seem to have long been scrambling to find a player for this position, trying out all sorts of out-of-position players. We saw that the right back, Zurgalbek Ulu, made a strong bid for the position and was there for quite a while in the early period. Also, attacking midfielder Musa Bekov, who we'll meet shortly, started a couple of times over here. And Zumachev, the only player coded for the position, only started twice. And then recently, as we said, left winger Ali Kulov moved over, and also forward Kai Merk was tried. So, as we said, all sorts of players being tried out, and the position still seems quite unsettled. But it looks like they will be going into the cup with an out-of-position player in this position. Zumachev, at best, a backup player for the position. All right, that is the midfield, and we go to the forward line. We begin with attacking midfielders here, and we've actually mentioned several of them. We have Almardon Shurkarov. We said he sometimes plays as a central midfielder. He's a likely candidate, as is Farhat Musabekov at the likely level. And we have one more, Tursunali Rostomov, also likely, although he's not really a starter. And then we have several candidates at the possible level. We have Alisher Zalilov, Kimi Merk, one of the Merk brothers, Amir Zaparov, and Murolimjan Akhmedov. 4 possible candidates there. And we also have a couple at the possible but unlikely level, which we won't mention unless they come back into the squad. Okay, let's take a look. We have a lot of candidates to look at here then, beginning with Almardon Shurkarov. So he's been with the team since 2017 with 25 caps and 5 goals. He's 24 years old. He also plays for that team in Belarus that we saw before, Neyman Grodno, and he's played in Turkey as well. Over the past 2 years, Shurkarov has started 11 of their 14 games, and he was not selected for 3 others, including the last 2 matches. Nevertheless, we keep him at the likely level because he really was a staple in the team, except for the last 2 games. Second likely candidate is Farhat Musabekov. So he's been with the team since 2015 and has 53 caps, 2 goals, so one of the more experienced players on the team. And he was part of the 2019 Asian Cup squad there, a starter in that tournament for Kyrgyzstan. Over the past 2 years, Musabekov has started 8 of their 14 games. And subbed in for one and not selected for five. He too not selected for the last two matches. So we alluded to this at the beginning, some big changes in recent games, and leaving Shukurov and Musabekov off the roster was a surprise. Anyway, we still think they're likely candidates because they were an important part of the squad. Also likely, Tursunali Rustamov. He has been with the team since 2012, but only 32 caps and 2 goals there. He's 32 years old, and he also is part of the Asian Cup squad, but just as a substitute. He did sub into 3 games, and he scored an important goal there, a tying goal at the end of extra time against UAE, although they lost the match in the end. So Rustamov has not started any of their 14 games, but he was subbed in for 5 and on the bench for 6. He's been injured for the last 2 matches and wasn't selected for 2 besides that. So his muscle injury may be a concern, although he is really better known as a substitute than as a starter. In fact, he has not started much recently. So all 3 of the likely players not available for the last 2 matches. Okay, let's look at the 4 possible candidates, beginning with Alisher Zalilov. And he has started 4 of their 14 games over the past 2 years, subbed in for 4 and on the bench for 1. He actually was out for 4 games with a fractured lower leg, but he came back from that. He's not selected for 4 other matches, also including the last 2 matches. Good Lord, I didn't realize there were so many of them in this position not selected for the last couple of matches. So he was a consistent starter. I'm going to say Alisher Zalilov all the time because there's a couple of other players called Zalilov. I don't know if they show up in our list here, but Kyrgyzstan, I think, has 3 players with that last name. Anyway, Alisher Zalilov was a consistent starter in 2021, and in fact for the first 2 games in 2022. But he was drifting off the team even before he suffered a fractured leg for the June 2022 games, and he's been in and out since, but as we said, not selected for the last 2 games. So that's Alisher Zalilov. I guess these players that we're turning to now are a couple of the players kind of coming into the squad. One is Kimi Merk. He's 19 years old. He got his first cap in October here, 2023, and started both of the remaining 2 games there. Of course, that is obviously due to the other players being absent. Kimi Merk was born in Germany, by the way. He's very young, so might be a bit of a surprise to see him taking over the position from veterans like Shukurov and Musabayev. The next player, Amir Zaparov, also quite young, 23 years old. He got his first cap in September of 2023. So he started 1 of their remaining 3 games, and he was subbed in for the 2 others. So again, a new player, but he has been selected. Again, that may be due to the injuries. Our final possible candidate here is Murolijan Akhmadov. He's been with the team since 2017 and has 17 caps, and he was selected for the 2019 Asian Cup, but was just on the bench for that tournament. And over the past 2 years, Akhmadov has started none of their 14 games, but he was subbed in for 4 and on the bench for 5, and not selected for 5 others. And believe it or not, that too includes the last 2 matches. So all sorts of players missing there. Okay, so a bit of a mess in terms of this position over the last couple of games. So overall, the attacking midfield position exists only sometimes. They do use a 4-2-3-1, as we saw. or sometimes in a 4-4-2 diamond formation where the midfield is a 1-2-1. We'll see an attacking midfielder, and we also see that some of these players move back into the central midfield. So Alisher Zalilov had it in 2021 and early 2022, as we saw, but then he drifted off the team. And since then, it's the attacking midfielders that we mentioned during our discussion of the central midfield. So that would be central midfielder Atabayev, and then attacking midfielders here, Musabekov and Shukurov, playing in this position. In the last two games, however, newcomer Kimi Merck has taken up the position. So it'll be interesting to see in November and going into the Cup what becomes of the attacking midfield position. And we move on to our final position, since we have no secondary strikers, the forward position. So we have one definite candidate here in Ernest Baturkanov. And we have the other Merck brother, Kai Merck, as a likely candidate. And we have Merlin Mirzaev also as a likely candidate. And one more still, Joel Kojo. And then we also have three possible candidates. I have a great story for you about Victor Meyer. Also, we have Mirbek Akhmataliev. And our third possible candidate, Dastanbek Toktosuno. And again, we have a couple of players that we won't put on the list here unless they come back into the, unless they're selected. So let's go back to the top and look at the biographies of some of these players. So Ernest Baturkanov has been with the team since 2018 and has 24 caps. He's 25 years old. And Baturkanov was selected for the 2019 Asian Cup, but he only subbed in briefly into one game there. And over the past 2 years, he started 4 of their 14 games. However, he was subbed in for 6 and on the bench for 4 others. So he only starts a few games, but he is always called up to the squad. And that's what we mean by definite here, as a definite candidate to be named to the final squad. Let's begin with the first of our 3 likely candidates in Kai Merck. So actually, he too was born in Germany like his brother. He is actually 6 years older than Kimi Merck. So we saw that Kimi Merck was quite young, but Kai Merck is not. He's 25 years old. He plays for a team in Luxembourg, having played in Germany before that. He got his first cap in March of 2023 and started 2 of their remaining 8 games, subbed in for 2, on the bench for 2, and not selected for 2. So Kai Merck, a likely candidate to make the squad. Next, we have Merlan Mirzaev, and he's the veteran here, actually the only other player in Kyrgyzstan's history with 60 caps or more. That's what he has, exactly 60. Caps and 16 goals since his first start in 2009. But I should say, oh, wow, he has played for a lot of teams in a lot of countries. But what's relevant here is that he was last with Hanoi in Vietnam, but left them, I believe it was in June or July of this year, and it's been unattached since. So he's not really playing club soccer, and that may well affect his presence on the national team here. Over the past 2 years, Mirzaev started 8 of their 14 games. He was on the bench for 2 and not selected for 6 others, including the last 2 matches. But we do see maybe a reason for that too. So he was their top scorer in World Cup qualifying. He got 5 of their 19 goals in the qualification campaign, and he only starts about half the games anyway, even though he kind of was the main forward. He doesn't seem to be anymore. And oh, sorry, I do have a note here that he left Hanoi on September 15th, so that kind of explains a little bit. He wasn't selected for the last 2 matches. So we have him as likely due to his reputation, but I would say because of his story, it's kind of up in the air for him. Our next candidate is Joel Kojo. He's a Ghanaian-born player who played in Kyrgyzstan long enough that he gained citizenship. Ironically, though, he doesn't play in Kyrgyzstan anymore. He's with Dinamo Samarkand in Uzbekistan since 2023. However, he got his first cap in June 2023 for Kyrgyzstan and started one of their remaining 5 games, and he was subbed in for the 4 others, so making a good bid for being called up. We have him as a likely candidate. Next, we have Victor Meyer. Well, Victor Meyer is a big name for the squad, but maybe doesn't play as much as one might think. Victor Meyer has been with the team since 2015. He has 24 caps and 4 goals. And he was selected for the final squad for the 2019 Asian Cup, but he was injured and replaced by another player. Oddly, this is the story I was referring to. He was their top scorer for the Asian Cup 2023 qualifying, despite just playing 1 game. So he returned after a more than 2.5-year absence in June of 2022, and he started one of their remaining games. He was subbed in for 1 and not selected for the last 10 matches. So the most we can say here is that he's a possible candidate. However, he scored 3 goals in that 1 game he played. Or actually, no, I think he was subbed in for a game. So he scored 3 goals over the 2 games he played during the period, and became the top scorer in qualifying for them. So, you know, he did come back for those important games. He plays in Germany, so perhaps that means he would come back for the cup here, and then doesn't play their friendlies and stuff like that. So we do have Victor Meyer at the possible level, even though he hasn't been part of the last 10 games. The second possible candidate is Mirbek Akhmataliev, and he has been with the team since 2016, but only has amassed 5 caps in that period. He appeared once actually in 2016 and once in 2021. So just 2 appearances over those 5 years. But he returned after an almost 2-year absence in September 2023 here, so just recently, and started one of their remaining 3 games and subbed in for the other 2. So it looks like Akhmataliev is finally getting his chance here. And he's on loan to a team in Malaysia, a club team in Malaysia right now. And our third possible candidate, Dastanbek Toktosuno, is just 21 years old. And he got his first cap recently in October 2023. Didn't start any of the, or either of the remaining 2 games, but was subbed in for both. So Toktosuno getting a chance to prove himself there. Okay, and we finish then with a summary of the forward position. So usually just 1 forward, but sometimes it is 2. And it was Mirzaev for most of the period, but he has drifted off the team recently. Baturkanov always seemed to be the backup, and in fact, he still seems to be the backup despite getting a few starts. He didn't really seize the starting position when Mirzaev lost it. More recently, Mirk and Kojo have been used, and then this perhaps is spelling the end for Mirzaev, who, as we saw, is without a club. But we do have to take into account the famous appearance by Victor Meyer, which puts him in the mix. He will perhaps return for the cup, you know, keeping in mind that he was injured for the cup in 2019 and missed his opportunity there. So honestly, I wouldn't be that surprised to see him coming in. Okay, that is the end of our look at the players, and let's go to closing thoughts. So even more than I thought, we do have changes. I mentioned it at the beginning, an influx of new players, especially in the October games. But equally so, a number of a number of regular selections not being called up. So we have a few reasons for that. One is injuries. One just seems to be new players brought in to replace old players, and it's hard to know which of those will be chosen. And we also have the complication of a new manager, perhaps maybe finish the phase of observing and actually making the changes that he wants to make before the Cup. So it'll be interesting to see what becomes of all that in the November game and in the selection for the Asian Cup squad. All right, and we'll do a preview of what we're going to do in part 2. So we will go through the list that we compiled here and make a note of any surprise non-selections there. Those would be players at the definite or possible level. Sorry, definite or likely level that are not selected for the squad, and then any surprise inclusions. So players at the possible but unlikely level or seems to be off the squad. And I gotta say, we didn't actually introduce a lot of those players here, so they will appear to be new players, but we do actually have a fairly long list of players here. We just didn't want to kind of make the media cast longer by going through all of them, but we will bring them back if they do make the final squad. And any new players too. We did see a few new players coming in September and October, and I think we might see a couple more before the Cup, because that often happens. And finally, we'll give an update on injuries. We didn't see any particular... oh, yes, of course, we did see the two central midfielders injured for the October game, so we'll be able to update that and see if those injuries are going to extend into the Cup. And then any injuries kind of closer to the Cup, we'll give an update on. So that brings us to the end of part 1, and we hope you join us for part 2. We originally planned to tag on our past, present, and future plans for the media cast, but we have instead decided to put a link to that 10-minute video in the show notes. It covers what we're working on and what we plan to do over the next 9 months. We'd like to thank Naber Abadsham and Pixabay for the wonderful music you hear in this media cast. The title is called Arabic Trap.